Welcome everyone to this Python tutorial, and in this tutorial I'm going to show you how to build API using a Flask framework. So as you can see on my screen, this is the empty folder, and here I'm going to create a new folder for the APIs. So simply create a new folder and I will call this folder API app. And now you need to open this folder into CMD. So here we are going to build the API using the Flask framework. So first we need to install the Flask framework. So to install Flask framework, type pip install Flask and then hit enter. It will take some time and installs a Flask framework on your system. As you can see here, Flask framework is installed successfully on your computer. Now next thing that we need to open this directory or this project into a VS Code. So for that, if you install VS Code, type code dot, then hit enter, and your project will be open in the VS Code. And now here you can see your project directory. So here within this project directory, you need to create a Python file, and in that Python file we will write our API definitions. So here I'm going to give a name to this Python file, api.py. Now next thing, we need to perform a 3 steps to create an API using Flask. So first we will import the Flask and create its instance, and second thing, we will define a roots, and to define a roots we will use here decorators for that. And the last thing, that we will return the desired data in each root function. So whatever the API you will create, suppose that you create 3 APIs endpoint, that API's endpoint must return a data, and the data should be in a JSON format. So we will return here data in a JSON format from the API endpoint. So we need to follow 3 things to define APIs. First, we will import the Flask and create a instance. Then we will use the decorator in the Flask to create a API endpoint to create a root. And after that, to return a desired data in each root function, we will use JSON format. Now let's begin. So first thing is that import the Flask and JSON file function from Flask import. So here we need to import a Flask, and the second is a JSONify. And this JSONify is the function provided by Flask to create a JSON data. So if you have a lists and dictionary, then you can use this JSONify function to create a JSON data. And as you know, JSON stands for JavaScript Object Notation. So it is a kind of a data which contains the keys and values. So here we have imported a Flask and JSONify from the Flask module. So as I here told you that after importing a Flask, we need to create an instance. So to create instance, type here app equal to, then use the Flask that you've imported, and then double underscore name like this. And after that, you need to use the decorator to define your API endpoint. So let's define an API endpoint. So to define an API endpoint, you're going to have to use the decorator at app.root, then parentheses. Within parentheses, you need to provide a single quote. Within single quote, you need to provide the API path or API endpoint. So in this case, I'm going to give a default path, default endpoint, which is only slash, which represent the home page. So I have defined the root. Next, we need to define the function. So type here def, and I will call it home. So just think like you have a website, and website has a different endpoints, API endpoints, and here the first API endpoint is the home. Then you just need to define a simple function, and after that this function will return a data. So in this case, I'm just returning a single string, which is a welcome to your first API. That's it. Now what we will do here, we will run this Flask. So to run this Flask, if you know about a Flask how to run it, then you will type like a if, then name, and after that equal to, then main, and then app dot run to run the Flask, and keep debug equal to true, like this. So to run this Python file, in your terminal type here python, then file name api.py and hit enter, and it will start a server. So you need to visit this link http 127.0.0.15000. So click on this and it will open your home page, which is the default endpoint that just you have defined. So here you can see the message, welcome to your first API, and this message is written by this API endpoint that you have defined here. So by default, this one is your slash is the default endpoint. Now you can define any number of API endpoint. Let's say that you want to show us some kind of information in JSON format on this page. So what you can do here, again type here at app.root, then within this parentheses specify the API root, which is slash info, and after that define function def info. Then this function is going to return a JSON data. So here type return, and here we will use our imported JSONify function to return a JSON data. So here type JSONify, then specify a parenthesis. Within parentheses we need to provide a key value pair in the curly braces or as objects. So here type curly braces, and then within this we need to provide key value pair. So here first is the key, so here I will give first as the name, and then second is the value, so value is James, and same way provide another key value pairs. So here and the key value pair is age, and the age is the integer number, so I will type here 24. So what you have done here, you have just defined another root point or API endpoint, which is a slash info. So whatever the address that you see here, after this 5000, this is your domain name, and if you specify slash info, you will be able to see your defined endpoint. But at this time we don't see because we need to refresh this server. So I want you to stop this server and then again restart this server. After restarting this server, when you again visit this API endpoint slash info and hit enter, you can see your JSON data, and the first is the key and the second is the value. As you can see here, key is the age and the value is 24, and again the second key value is the name and James. So here this is how you can use the JSONify function of the Flask to return a JSON data. And more important thing that you define API endpoint like this. You first use your decorator like at app.root, then within parentheses you use a single quote, or as a string you specify the endpoint, you define the endpoint path. So let's create one more endpoint, API endpoint. So I'm going to copy this, and here I'm going to say slash data, this is another endpoint, and after that instead of a name, so for example here I'm going to give a country, and country is USA, and then country code is +1. That's it. And now again we need to restart this Flask. So type Python, and now here we are getting error. So what is the error? Let's fix it. So the error is we need to change this to data because we have already defined here info. So now again run this server and then go here. So instead of slash info, you have defined another endpoint slash data. So type here slash data and hit enter. Now you can see that data code is 1 and country is USA. So using the Flask, this is how you can define or build a API endpoint. You can build even a more complex API endpoint that will be learned in the next video tutorial. So at last I want to say, don't forget to subscribe our YouTube channel, and thank you.